Christmas Eve had arrived in Redstone Hollow, but it did not feel like Christmas at all. There were no decorations, no laughter echoing through the streets, and no families gathering around warm lights. Instead, there was only silence, a deep, heavy silence that seemed to sink into the wooden ground itself. The town was older than most memories could reach. Once it had been full of cowboys, traders, horses, and gunfire stories, but now it was nothing more than a forgotten mark on the map of the Wild West. The buildings leaned slightly as if tired of standing. The saloon doors barely moved anymore, except when the cold wind forced them to breathe. Snow was falling slowly but not gently. It felt like the sky was letting go of something it could no longer carry. Every flake landed like a quiet reminder that time keeps moving, even when life stops. At the far end of this broken town stood the railway station. It was old, wooden, and half dead, just like the town itself. The paint had peeled away years ago, leaving raw wood exposed to endless winters. A single lantern hung above the platform, flickering weakly as if it might give up at any moment. Its light barely touched the ground, only enough to reveal shadows that never stayed still. The railway tracks stretched forward into darkness. They disappeared into the frozen mountains, like a promise that no one believed anymore. No one came to this station unless they were lost, or waiting for something they refused to accept was gone. And that is exactly why Ethan Cole was there. Ethan was a man in his late 30s, but life had carved him into something older. His face carried exhaustion that sleep could not fix. His eyes had a quiet emptiness that only comes from waiting too long for something that may never return. He wore a long brown coat. Worn at the edges, his boots were dusty and cracked from years of standing in the same place. His hands stayed buried in his pockets, not because of cold, but because of memory. He stood perfectly still on the platform, not pacing, not sitting, just waiting. His eyes never left the tracks because 5 years ago, those same tracks had taken everything from him. Her name was Clara. She had been his wife. She had left on a train one winter morning 5 years ago. It was supposed to be a short trip. She had promised him she would return soon. She had smiled at him in a way that made him believe the world would always stay safe for them. But she never came back. No letter, no explanation, no goodbye that made sense. Only silence, and in the Wild West, silence was worse than gunfire. Every year on the same date, Christmas Eve, Ethan returned to the station. People in the town had stopped asking questions long ago. Some said he was mad, some said he was cursed, some said he was simply a man who refused to accept reality. But Ethan did not care what they said, because weeding was the only thing that still connected him to her. The wind suddenly grew stronger, pushing through the station like an angry memory. The lantern above him flickered violently. For a moment, it looked like it would die completely. Shadows stretched across Ethan's face, making him look like part of the darkness itself. He lowered his head slightly and whispered into the cold air, "If you're still out there, I'm still here." His voice disappeared into the wind instantly. Far away, beyond the frozen hills, a faint train whistle echoed through the night. Ethan slowly lifted his eyes. For the first time in 5 years, something inside him felt like it moved. Please pause and answer this question. What is the main character's name? A. Thomas Cole, B. David Cole, C. Ethan Cole, D. Peter Cole. Please do not reveal the answer. And before we continue, tell us in the comments which country or city you are watching this story from. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more emotional, Wild West stories like this. The train was not just moving through land that night. It was cutting through silence itself. Far away from Redstone Hollow, beyond the frozen ridges and abandoned mining paths of the Wild West, a long iron locomotive pushed forward through the darkness, like a glowing scar across the night. Its wheels screamed against the rails, releasing bursts of steam that vanished instantly into the freezing air. Inside one of the dimly lit passenger cars, the world felt completely different from the emptiness outside. Warm gas lamps flickered softly along the wooden interior, casting yellow light over tired travelers. Some were soldiers returning home, some were merchants carrying locked trunks, and others were simply people, running away from places they no longer wanted to remember. But in the corner of the carriage, sitting alone near a fog-covered window, was a woman who did not belong to any of those stories. Her name was Elena Marlowe. She looked to be in her early 30s, though. Something about her expression made her feel older than time itself. Her face was calm, but it was the kind of calm that came after surviving something. painful enough to erase parts of yourself. Her dark coat was neatly wrapped around her hands resting still in her lap, but her fingers occasionally tightened, as if her body remembered fear even when her mind did not. Outside the window, the Wild West passed by in blurred fragments. Broken fences, dead trees, empty land, and distant mountain silhouettes. Everything looked familiar, yet strange, like she had seen it before in a dream. She couldn't remember fully. And that was the most unsettling part. She didn't know why she was traveling to Redstone Hollow. No clear reason, no confirmed destination. Inside her memory, that made sense. Only a feeling, deep and persistent, that something was waiting for her there. Not a place, not a person, something connected to her existence itself. She reached into her coat and touched a small, locked leather bag resting beside her. It was old, scratched, and sealed with a rusted metal clasp. She didn't remember packing it. She didn't remember when she got it, but she also couldn't let go of it. It felt important. The train jolted slightly as it crossed a bridge. The passengers barely reacted, but Elena's breath tightened. For a second, a strange image flashed in her mind. Firelight, shouting voices, and the sound of a horse galloping through chaos. Then it disappeared just as quickly as it came. She closed her eyes for a moment. "Why does it feel like I've been here before?" She whispered softly, but no one heard her. Over the rhythm of the train, the conductor walked through the carriage, announcing stops in a tired voice, naming places she didn't recognize. Each name passed through her mind like dust, meaningless, distant, forgotten, until he finally said it. Next stop, Redstone Hollow. The name hit differently, not loud, not dramatic, but deep, like something inside. Her chest had recognized it before her mind could understand it. Elena opened her eyes slowly and looked out the window again. The landscape was darker now. The mountains ahead looked sharper, closer, like they were watching her arrival. The wind outside seemed stronger, pressing against the train as if trying to stop it from going further. And yet it kept moving closer, closer. As the train descended toward the valley, Elena felt an unfamiliar pressure building inside her thoughts. Not fear exactly, but anticipation mixed with something she couldn't name. Her fingers gently tightened around the edge of her coat. A memory tried to surface again, but broke apart before forming anything clear. A man's voice, snow falling, a promise, and then nothing. The train whistle echoed again, louder this time. Redstone Hollow was near. Elena turned slightly toward the window. Her reflection fainted against the glass. For a moment, she didn't recognize herself. It felt like she was looking at someone who had lived another life, one she had forgotten on purpose. The train slowed. Brakes screamed through the night. Steam exploded into the cold air, and the station lights of Redstone Hollow finally appeared ahead, small, weak and flickering, like an unfinished memory waiting to be completed. Elena didn't know it yet, but the moment she stepped off this train, her life would stop being something she understood and start becoming something she had to survive. And for everyone watching this story, tell us in the comments which country or city you are watching from. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more Wild West, emotional stories like this. The train finally slowed as it approached Redstone Hollow, its iron wheels grinding against the tracks like a long, tired sigh. Steam burst into the frozen air, wrapping the station in thick white clouds that swallowed everything. For a few seconds, the whistle echoed across the empty Wild West valley, sharp and haunting, as if it was warning the night that something important was about to happen. On the platform, Ethan Cole stood completely still. The lantern above him flickered harder now, struggling against the wind that pushed through the broken wooden station. Snow hit his shoulders, his hat, his coat, but he didn't move. He had been waiting so long that even time felt like it had stopped respecting him. Then the train came to a full stop. A heavy silence followed, the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, but feels charged, like the air itself is holding its breath. One by one, the carriage doors opened. Warm light spilled onto the cold platform as passengers stepped down, boots hitting the snow, voices murmuring, luggage dragging, but Ethan saw none of them. His eyes were locked on the second carriage, the one where something inside him was screaming, louder with every passing second. And then she appeared. Elena Marlowe stepped down carefully from the train. For a brief moment, she paused on the last step, adjusting her balance as cold air rushed against her face. Snowflakes immediately caught in her hair and coat. She looked around slowly, taking in the station. The emptiness, the broken town behind it, Something about the place made her chest tighten again, like she had stood here before in another life. Her boots touched the platform, a soft crunch in the snow. That sound alone was enough to break something inside Ethan, because for a moment, just one impossible moment, his mind refused to accept what his eyes were seeing. She looked like Clara, not exactly, but close enough that pain blurred the difference. Same posture, same quiet way of standing still after stepping into the cold, same way her eyes scanned the world, like she was searching for something she couldn't name. Ethan took one step forward without realizing it. Then another. His breath became uneven. Visible in the freezing air, "Elena," he whispered. But his voice didn't sound like his own. She turned slightly and their eyes met. The world did not move in that moment. The wind didn't matter. The train didn't matter. The snow didn't matter. Only the space between them existed. Elena felt it instantly, an unfamiliar pressure in her chest. Like her heart recognized him before her mind could explain why. Her fingers tightened slightly at her side, near the locked leather bag she carried everywhere. Something about this man made her feel heavy, like a memory was pressing against her thoughts from the inside. Ethan's lips parted again, this time louder. "Clara." The name broke into the cold air, like a ghost being spoken back into existence. Elena froze completely. That name did something to her. Not recognition, not understanding, but impact like a distant echo, hitting a wall inside her mind and collapsing into confusion. Her brows tightened slightly. "No," she said softly. Almost automatically, "My name is Elena." The words should have ended it. They didn't, because Ethan didn't step back and Elena didn't look away. Instead, something far more dangerous happened between them. Silence started connecting what words could not explain. Behind them, the train released another long boast of steam, swallowing part of the platform in drifting white fog. For a few seconds, Ethan's face disappeared inside it, and when it cleared, his eyes were wet. Not from snow, but from something much deeper: grief, hope, confusion, all tangled together. Elena took a small step backward without realizing it. Not out of fear, but instinct. Like her body was trying to protect her from emotions. Her mind hadn't learned how to understand yet. "I think," she said slowly. Struggling to find clarity. "You're mistaken." Ethan shook his head slightly, as if rejecting reality itself. "I waited 5 years," he said, voice breaking just enough to show the pain underneath. "Every Christmas, same place, same night for you." The words landed between them like a weight. Elena stared at him, not understanding, but feeling something she couldn't move, tightening inside her chest. Because deep down, a part of her felt like she should understand, like she was missing something important, something that belonged to this moment. A distant train horn echoed again in the valley. Long and lonely, the wind pushed harder through the station, making the lanterns swing above them, casting their shadows into unstable shapes on the snow. Ethan stood frozen in front of her, afraid that if he blinked, she would disappear again like she had 5 years ago. Elena finally broke eye contact, her voice softer now. "I don't know who you are." A pause, then almost like it would hurt to admit. "But why does it feel like I should?" And in that moment, Redstone Hollow became more than a stop on a railway line. It became the beginning of something neither of them understood yet, but both of them were already trapped inside. The night in Redstone Hollow did not feel like it ended after the train stopped. Instead, it felt like the entire town had woken up after years of pretending to be dead. The wind moved differently now, heavier, slower, almost as if it was carrying secrets instead of cold air. Ethan stood still for a long time after Elena spoke. Her words kept repeating in his mind like an echo that refused to fade. "I don't know who you are, but why does it feel like I should?" That sentence was more dangerous than any gunshot he had ever heard. In the Wild West, Elena finally agreed to stay in the town for the night. There was no proper hotel anymore. Only a few old rooms above a closed trading post that still had wooden beds and broken lamps. The town was too empty to offer comfort, but it still had shelter. As they walked through the silent streets together, every step sounded too loud. Snow crunched under their boots, and distant wooden signs creaked in the wind. Ethan walked slightly ahead, not because he was leading her, but because he didn't trust his own emotions if he kept looking at her too closely. Elena, however, kept looking around. Something about the town felt familiar, not like she had visited it, but like she had lived it. The buildings were old and leaning, but some of them triggered strange flickers in her mind. A red door, a broken fence, a bell sound that no longer existed. Each detail tried to become a memory, but broke apart before forming completely. They reached an abandoned church at the edge of town. It stood darker than the rest of Redstone Hollow. Its wooden cross tilted slightly to one side, as if even faith had grown tired here. The doors were not fully closed. They were hanging open a little. Swaying gently in the wind, Ethan stopped. "This place," he said quietly, almost unwillingly. "It's been closed for years." But Elena had already stepped forward. Something had pulled her attention inside. Without fully understanding why, she pushed the door open. The sound it made was slow, painful like wood, remembering it was no longer strong. Inside the church was half destroyed. Dust covered every bench, broken glass. Windows allowed moonlight to fall in sharp angles across the floor. The air smelled like old wood. Ashes and forgotten prayers. At the center of the room stood something that should not have been there, a mirror large, old, framed in cracked dark wood. It looked completely out of place, too clean compared to the decay around it, as if someone had placed it there recently or hidden it on purpose. Elena walked closer. Ethan followed slowly behind her. "Don't touch it," he said suddenly. His voice tense, but it was too late. Elena's fingers reached the glass. The moment she touched it, the world changed. The reflection did not show her present face properly. Instead, it flickered. For a split second, she saw a different version of herself, wearing old Wild West clothing, standing in front of burning wood, shouting at someone she couldn't see. Then it changed again, a man falling from a horse, gunfire in the distance, snow turning into fire. A child crying somewhere inside a broken house. Elena pulled her hand back, instantly breathing heavily. "What was that?" she whispered. Ethan stepped forward, but he was now looking at the mirror, too. And for the first time, he saw something as well. A flash, Clara, but not the memory he expected. She wasn't smiling this time. She was running, holding something in her hand, something important, and then darkness. Ethan staggered slightly backward. No, that's not how it happened." Elena turned toward him, shaking. "What did you see?" But Ethan couldn't answer, because the truth he thought he knew for 5 years had just started breaking apart in front of him. Suddenly, the mirror cracked slightly. A soft sound like reality itself was under pressure. And inside that crack, Elena saw one last image. Her own face standing in a completely different life next to Ethan, but not as strangers, as something else, something connected. The moment vanished, silence returned. The church felt colder than before. Ethan looked at the mirror, then at Elena, and for the first time in years, he wasn't sure if he was remembering the past or standing inside something that had never finished happening. Before we continue the story, tell us in the comments from which country or city you are watching this Wild West story. Now let's continue. The moment they left the abandoned church, the silence of Redstone Hollow no longer felt normal. It felt changed, like something inside the town had shifted after the mirror incident. Even though nothing outside looked different, snow still fell. The wind still moved between the wooden houses, but now every sound felt sharper, more meaningful, as if the town itself was listening. Ethan walked ahead without speaking. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed forward, but his thoughts were far behind, stuck inside that mirror. What he had seen was not just a memory. It was something incomplete, something wrong, and worst of all, something that did not match what he had believed for 5 years. Elena followed him quietly, but she was no longer just confused. She was disturbed, because the flashes she saw in the mirror were not random anymore. They felt organized, like pieces of a life she had never been allowed to fully remember. A fire, a gunshot, a woman running, a child crying, and Ethan always nearby, always connected. Even if she didn't understand how, they reached the old sheriff's office at the center of the town. It was barely standing. A faded wooden sign still hung above the door, swinging slightly in the wind. Redstone Hollow Sheriff Records. Ethan stopped in front of it. "This place hasn't been opened in years," he said quietly. But Elena was already staring at it, because something inside her was pushing her forward again. They entered inside. Dust covered everything. Old desks, broken chairs, scattered papers, and drawers that looked like they hadn't been touched in a decade. Moonlight passed through cracked windows, cutting the room into pale strips of light and shadow. Ethan moved directly to a locked cabinet. His hands were shaking slightly now. He didn't even realize it. But he was afraid not of danger, but of truth. He forced the cabinet open using a rusted key he had kept for years, one he once took from the old sheriff. Before the office closed permanently, inside were old files tied together with faded rope and yellow paper. He pulled one out. The label was barely readable. Missing person file, Claire Avon. Ethan froze. Elena stepped closer without speaking. His fingers slowly opened the file. Inside was a photograph, a woman smiling slightly, standing in front of the same railway station, the same snow, the same town. Ethan's breathing stopped completely, because the woman in the photo was Clara, his wife, the one he had been waiting for. But then something inside him broke further because Elena also saw it. And her reaction was not confusion. It was shock, deep, instinctive shock. Her hand moved unconsciously toward the photo. "No," she whispered. Ethan looked at her sharply. But Elena's eyes were not on him anymore. They were on the photograph. Because the face in it was starting to feel like her own. The same eyes, the same expression. Not identical, but connected in a way that made her stomach tighten. Elena stepped back. This can't be right," she said. Voice trembling slightly, "That woman." Ethan's voice came out low and broken. "That's my wife." Gaping silence filled the room. Only the wind outside moved. Only the paper in the fire trembled slightly. A woman looked at him now, and for the first time feel her expression. Not fear of him, but fear of herself. "I don't remember this one," she said slowly. "But why does this face feel like it belongs to me?" Ethan looked at her again. We really looked at her not as Claire, not as Olivia, but as something in the truth. And that was when the truth started forming. Not so unbelievable, but impossible to reveal. Because Clara Vaughn had disappeared 5 years ago. After investigating something hidden in this town, and outworkers that control more than one, they control by, you can slowly turn the nozzle into the fire on the port. With the attachment, but he'll be there. Subject may have undergone identity displacement. Due to experimental psychological extraction, conducted by unknown faction operating in the real world. That's not possible? But you think boys were quiet? Then explain why I buried you 5 years ago. And why you are saving me, I want someone else to save me. And in that moment, Redstone Hollow stopped feeling like a town. It started feeling like a place where truth had been buried and never finished dying. The wind outside the sheriff's office had turned violent, as if the town itself was reacting to the truth being uncovered inside. Snow slammed against the wooden walls in uneven bursts, and the weak lanterns along the street flickered like dying memories. Refusing to disappear, inside the room silence had become heavier than sound. Ethan stood still, holding the old file in his hands. The paper trembled slightly, not just from his grip, but from everything collapsing inside him at once. The name Claire Vaughn was no longer just a memory. It was a question that refused to stay buried. Elena stood a few steps away, but it felt like miles. Her breathing was uneven now. Her fingers kept tightening and releasing at her sides, as if her body was trying to hold on to a reality that kept breaking apart. The photograph on the desk felt louder than words. The face in it, Clara's face, no longer felt like someone else. It felt close, too close. "I don't understand this," Elena whispered. Her voice fragile, now almost lost under the storm outside. "I don't remember being her, but I don't feel like I'm completely someone else either." Ethan looked up slowly for the first time in years. There was no certainty in his eyes, only exhaustion and fear. "I buried my life with her 5 years ago," he said quietly after she disappeared. "They told me she was dead, the town, the records. Everything confirmed it." He paused. Then his voice broke slightly, "But I never saw her body." That sentence changed the air in the room. Elena took a step back without realizing it. Outside, a loud gust of wind slammed into the building, making the wooden structure groan somewhere in the distance. A train whistled echoed faintly, long, slow, and almost unnatural, like it wasn't part of the present moment. Elena turned toward the sound instinctively, and for a split second she saw something again, not fully just flashes. A railway platform, a man standing in the snow, a promise being made. Her own voice saying something she could not hear clearly. Then nothing. She stumbled slightly, catching herself on the edge of the desk. Ethan moved forward instinctively, but stopped halfway because something in him was changing too. He wasn't just seeing Claire and Elena anymore. He was seeing something worse. Possibility, that mirror, Ethan said slowly. Almost to himself, it didn't just show memories. Then what did it show? Elena looked at him sharply. Ethan hesitated, his voice dropped. It showed what was never finished. A long silence followed. The kind of silence that feels like the world is waiting for someone to decide what happens next. Elena slowly turned back toward the photo. Her fingers hovered above it, shaking, and then she touched it. The moment Hoskin made contact with the photograph, everything inside the room reacted at once. The lantern light flickered violently. The papers on the desk lifted slightly as if pulled by invisible pressure, and Elena's vision collapsed into darkness. A flood of images hit her mind all at once. A railway station, a man waiting, a promise made in snow, a fire burning through wood and night. A voice calling her name, not Elena. Not Clara, something in between. She gasped sharply and stepped back. Ethan caught her before she fell. And for a moment they were both frozen there, caught between past and present, truth and illusion, memory and something that refused to be defined. Elena looked up at him slowly. Her eyes were wet. "Now I don't know who I am," she whispered. A pause, then softer. "But I know one thing. This story didn't start when I arrived here." Ethan didn't answer because deep down, he already knew the truth was not about finding Clara. It was about realizing she may never have been fully lost. Just divided, outside the storm began to calm, as if even the weather was exhausted from carrying the weight of what had been uncovered. Ethan helped Elena stand properly. Neither of them spoke for a long time, because there was nothing left that could explain it. Clearly, only one truth remained. Whatever had happened 5 years ago in Redstone Hollow was not over. It had only changed shape, and somewhere beyond the frozen tracks, the answer was still waiting. This is the end of the story. Please tell us in the comments what you thought about this story. And did you like it or not? Also tell us which country or city you are watching our story from. Your support and feedback means a lot to our channel and helps us bring more emotional and cinematic Wild West stories like this in the future.